of our general plan. And this is a different format for the workshop than we had anticipated when we started working on this project. But this is a COVID-imposed method that we need to use, and we hope that we have a really good presentation for you, and this will run smoothly on Zoom. We have a lot of material to cover this evening, and we anticipate going until about 8 o'clock. Hopefully you can stay till the very end, but we are recording the session, and the video of the session will be posted on the city's website after the workshop, so you'll be able to go back and watch it. At first, I would just like to cover a few items of etiquette in terms of how the Zoom program is going to run. We are asking that everybody stay muted during the main presentation. We have muted everybody for that purpose. And then there will be periods throughout the presentations where we will stop and ask for questions, and we will ask that you raise your hand, which we believe that all of you have the ability to do that. On the Zoom function, there's a little raise hand that you can actually click, and it'll raise your hand. If it doesn't work for you and you really want to say something and ask a question, just do the old-fashioned, get our attention. And one of us will be watching for you.
She's telling me Kara says share the screen.
So
I am sharing the screen.
Just bear with us a little bit, have some patience. This is the first time we're doing this in this format. And, hopefully we'll get through the evening really quickly. So as I mentioned, there will be an opportunity to have questions and answers throughout the presentation. There's also an opportunity to make comments via the chat function in Zoom. We will not be able to respond to the chat functions as we're doing the presentations. However, we are going to save all of the chats, all the comments that everybody has submitted. We will compile them at the end of the meeting and, again, have that posted on the city's website. We've created a general plan update section in the city's planning department webpage. If you pull up the planning department's webpage and scroll to the bottom, you will see the general plan update portion. The format for tonight's presentation is that we will have city staff presenting various aspects, topics, and the city staff that are here tonight, in addition to myself, are Andrea Kiefer, Rose Hess, Kara Michi, and Claire Barcelona. During the presentation, like I mentioned, you will have opportunity to do questions and answers. You may submit written comments via email to the planning department. That address will post periodically, but that address is planning@cityofbuellton.com. And there are opportunities, and will be continuing opportunities, for you to submit input via surveys that we will be sending out. We'll also be putting onto our webpage a link to a SurveyMonkey survey that you can fill out. We anticipate having that pretty soon. Okay, so with that, I would like to turn the mic over to Andrea Kiefer, who will be presenting some introductory information about the project that we're working on.
Great, thank you very much, Irma. Good evening, everybody. This is as Irma mentioned, our first workshop for the land use and circulation element update. So we are updating those two elements of our Buellton general plan. The land use element will be a more focused update, and it's mainly cleanup and also to reflect the changes.
No one told me to change the screen yet.
That we will be making, which will be a more comprehensive update for the circulation update. In addition to the land use and circulation element updates, there are certain statutory requirements that must be included in the updates. And so just a couple of examples of that would be social equity, which will be covered later on in the presentation.
The right slide.
And certain state laws that have to be incorporated into the update, including some provisions for housing and transportation. Next slide, please.
Whoops.
So it'll actually be a couple slides ahead. What is the general plan? So I mentioned earlier that we are updating our general plan. So what is a general plan, or we are updating several elements? A general plan is can best be described as the blueprint for a community's vision of future growth. It is also a policy document that is required by state law. So it provides long-range guidance for things like land use and circulation, and also development. But there also are other city issues that are typically covered in a general plan, such as economic growth, open space, conservation, housing, employment, and noise, are to name a few. Next slide. So this will be covered a little bit more in depth during later on in the presentation. However, I just wanted to give a quick overview of what a land use element is. So a land use element designates general locations and intensities of housing, businesses, industry, open space, educational facilities, public buildings, waste disposal facilities, and other land uses. In addition to this, it helps guide future development and preserves environmental resources. Next slide, thank you. And then, so again, what is a circulation element, which will also be covered later on in the presentation. A circulation element typically includes goals and policies relating to how people, products, and visitors move around Buellton. And that includes things like transportation infrastructure for cars, bicycles, and pedestrians, as well as public transportation, like things like buses and shuttles. Next slide. So the next question we want to cover is, so why are we doing this? So the land use and circulation elements were last updated in 2007. So because of that, and because there's been, approximately 13 years since the last update, we wanted to be able to reflect the changes that have happened during this time. So a lot of these will be covered a little bit more in depth during the land use presentation. However, things like the Avenue of Flags specific plan that was adopted in 2017, the village specific plan, which was modified last in 2013, the 2018 economic development strategy, and also several private development projects that have since been built in Buellton.
Everything's going good on your end, Rose?
We also are doing this because we'd like to identify the best future land uses for vacant and underutilized properties in Buellton. There will be, later on again in the presentation, this will be covered in detail. We'd also like to establish relevant long-term improvements to our citywide circulation system, including Highway 246, but it would be, as I mentioned earlier, it's a comprehensive update of the circulation element, so we will be looking at the entire city. Additionally, we want to consider gaps in policies, programs, and statutory requirements, and we'd like to confirm and clarify the vision for the future. The more focused update of the land use element and the comprehensive update of the circulation element will inform a more comprehensive update of the land use element and all of the other general plan elements in 2005. So the current general plan planning horizon runs from 2007 through 2025. So in a few years from now, there will be we will be working on a comprehensive update of all of the other elements, and these two updates will help inform that more comprehensive update. So where does the land use and circulation element update, where do these updated policies, programs, and any updates that are made to it, where do they apply? Well, they apply to Buellton city limits, which are shown here in this figure here. So there's not an aerial background, but to the west, it covers Riverview Drive, all the way to Riverview Drive, and then on the east, all the way to Ballard Canyon. To the south, all the way to the San Ynez River, and to the north to McMurray Road and Hanada Park Road. Next slide, please. So when is all of this going to happen? So we've broken up the project into 4 phases. So you can see this little diagram here. In the first phase, which is the phase we're in now, this is the existing condition. This is where we are looking at the existing conditions, different issues and opportunities, and potential outcomes that the community would like to see. So this, again, is the phase we're currently in, and really the focus of the workshop tonight. And this is where we would really, for tonight, we'd really like to get some of the community's input on some of what they see as, different outcomes they'd like to see, some of the different issues or opportunities around the town as they relate to land use and circulation. So yes, it's really important to get the community's input on these tonight. So, and throughout the process. So we will be holding several workshops, including this one, and some more subsequent workshops to get this input. The second phase is where we would prepare a concept report, and that report would be based upon all of the input that we received in the first phase. And the draft land use and circulation elements will be prepared and reviewed at a workshop and public hearings. So that would be in the second phase, and that's slated to happen fall 2020 through winter 2021. The third phase is where we would be preparing, and our consultants would be preparing the program EIR, and the land use and circulation elements would be refined as necessary based upon community input. The program EIR will also have a review period during which the document will be available for review and comment. So that would happen winter to spring 2021. The fourth and final phase consists of review and adoption of the final land use and circulation elements and the accompanying program EIR. The expected completion of the project, the final completion date for the project itself would be sometime around fall to 2021. Next slide. Okay, so like I mentioned before, we really need your input throughout the entire process. So we've tried to set up several ways to participate. The first is to attend a community workshop. So thank you all for participating tonight. We will have additional workshops as we progress through the process here. So we encourage everyone to attend those workshops. Let's see, you can also watch the workshop online if you're not participating in the Zoom tonight, or you can view it at a later time to stay up to date on what is being covered in this workshop and subsequent workshops. We will be sending out periodic notices regarding upcoming workshops and public hearings, and sending out surveys, as Irma mentioned, for the community to complete. So I would just say be on the lookout for those as we send them out throughout the process. Another way to participate is by contacting us at the planning department with any questions or comments you might have throughout the process. We're happy to discuss the project with you and take any input you might have. You can also sign up for our email alerts. The email is at the bottom of this slide here. And this will get you on a list, and you will be notified of any upcoming workshops, surveys, outreach, etc. And lastly, you can visit the planning department webpage at any time, which we have populated and will continue to populate with some informational documents throughout the process. Next slide, please. So what are the goals for tonight at our first community workshop? The first would be to inform the community. So staff will be presenting where we are currently at with the land use and circulation element update. And we will be presenting on both the land use element and the circulation elements. So this will include a summary of the existing conditions and some potential opportunities we might have going forward. But secondly, the purpose of this workshop is really to listen to the community. So we want to understand and hear from the community as to what the community's needs and issues are. And also, in addition to that, we'd like to hear what some of the outcomes the community would like to achieve as they relate to the land use and circulation here in Buellton. So that's the goal of this first workshop. We will be having some future workshops and public hearings, as we mentioned. And so later on at some of the subsequent future workshops, we will be considering concept plans and drafted land use and circulation element updates. So this will include formulating and presenting some of the potential solutions and options to address the needs and issues in the community as they relate to the land use and circulation element and the desired outcomes that the community has. So again, this is where we need the community's input. Your input is essential to the development of this update. It is important to point out that the land use and circulation elements are sort of tied together in a sense, where the land use concept informs the circulation element update in a lot of ways, and the goals and programs and policies that go within that circulation element. So that'll be covered a little bit later on in the presentation, but just wanted to preface it with that. With that, I am available for any questions if the public has any at this point.
I believe Marcelo Sarquillo, I saw that you were raising your hand. Marcelo, do you have a question?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
I think we need to unmute him, maybe?
It's not unmuting.
Uh-oh.
There, am I unmuted? Good.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
What is EIR?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's Environmental Impact Report. So
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's basically the CEQA process that we would be, CEQA, so that's another acronym, through the California Environmental Quality Act, which basically analyzes potential environmental impacts associated with what we're doing here with the updates. And so a program environmental impact report is the required document that would go along with that.
Yeah, it comes up all the time. I just had a brain fart. I'm sorry.
No, I apologize. I should have. Using acronyms, I should be, saying them at their length at first to let everyone know. So that would be environmental impact report.
You were on a good roll.
Okay.
I'm also seeing Larry. His hand is raised, so I'm going to ask him to unmute.
You could please unmute? We cannot hear you, Larry.
Okay, now I am unmuted.
There you go.
Here, yeah.
All right, okay. So I was wondering if the because I answered the monkey survey, and it was having to do with 246 and 101 and various issues. But are you dealing with any issues that are not only within the city limits, but outside the city limits that could become issues? Is this general plan study only within the city limits and does not look at any possibilities of expansion outside the city limits?
So, just to answer the first part of your question, other regional documents do sort of inform the land use and circulation element update for, what's applicable in the city limits. So there's other, studies that have been conducted related to both land use and circulation that would be, again, informing this update. However, the update really only applies to the land within city limits. If, in terms of looking at expansion outside of city limits, that's not something that this land use update would be focusing on. That would be more as part of the comprehensive land use and a general plan update, rather, that would be occurring, over the next few years through 2025.
Oh.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, with that, as long as there's no other questions, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kara Michi to cover the land use presentation.
Actually, I will start off on the land use presentation in the first section, and then Kara will take over.
Okay, sounds great.
And we have that broken up into two parts there. So, next slide, please. So, Andrea touched a little bit about what a land use element is, and I will elaborate just a little bit more during this section. The land use element guides how land may be developed or used by designating each parcel in the land for a particular land use and establishing broad development policies for those types of uses, for each of the uses. The land use designations identify both the types of development, types of construction and use that can take place on a parcel, and it also identifies the density or the intensity of allowed development, such as the maximum number of housing units per acre or the amount of building square footage that can be built. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we will be looking at during this update of the land use element is it's really a focused update. We're looking at what has happened since 2002 that we need to incorporate into the land use element. It's kind of a cleanup and update session rather than a comprehensive update at this point. So one of the main things that has happened is that the redevelopment agency has ceased operating, and any redevelopment plans and related funding have been dismantled. So we need to remove this from the land use element. The Oak Springs Village specific plan was included in 2007, but it has been amended since then, and it's changed its name to the Village Specific Plan, and there have been specific land uses designated for that property, so we need to add these to the land use element. The Avenue Flags Specific Plan was adopted in 2017. Previously, the general plan had talked about the Avenue Flags Urban Design Plan, which encompassed a redevelopment agency project as well. So that was put on hold at that time, and now that we have adopted the Avenue Flag Specific Plan, we need to add that also to the land use element. We have several affordable housing overlay zones in the city. I'll talk about them a little bit more in detail in just a few slides from now, but basically 4 of those sites have been developed, and on a couple of these we need to adjust the land use designations for what they ended up being built on that land. And finally, and most recently, the Williamson property was acquired by the city, and this is a future opportunity for the city to look at, and this is going to be addressed in greater detail in just a few minutes here. Next slide, please, Claire. So the goals of the general plan update will remain essentially the same, and there are 4 major goals in the existing general plan land use element. It's to manage the growth of the city so that adequate facilities and services can be provided in pace with development, to expand shopping and services that better provide for the needs of the residents, to revitalize the Avenue Flags and Highway 246 core as an identifiable downtown, which is the physical and social center of Buellton, and make it an inviting place for visitors and residents alike. And finally, to focus growth inward to accommodate population increases and housing needs. Compact, contiguous development within existing city boundaries is preferred over annexation and sprawling development. The programs and policies in the existing land use element will be updated as needed. Again, as I mentioned, there were some updates that have occurred since 2007, so we're going to need to update the programs and policies to reflect this. We will also need to reflect statutory requirements, legislation that's been passed, including affordable housing and social equity. And we'll take a look at the existing programs that have been implemented, what achievements have been done, accomplished, changes that need to be made, and ongoing programs which are are still happening. We will also look at special land use considerations that have been a part of the city's process during the intervening years, that brought about by legislative requirements and just by our own circumstances, such as historic and archaeological resources. The urban growth boundary could be a potential, although as Andrea mentioned in her previous reply, this is not going to be something that we'll be looking at in detail in this update, but information that we receive from the community as part of this update process could inform us of issues that we may need to take into consideration when, in the next few years, as we move towards 2025, we may need to consider whether we have adequate land to meet the needs of Buellton. But it's not a specific update that we'll be doing right now. We'll also be taking a look at strategic planning and economic development considerations that may inform both the land use element and the circulation element update. Next, please. I just would quickly like to go through the land use designations that currently are within Buellton. We have land of approximately 1,025 acres. We have 10 land use designations as described in the existing land use element. Residential is a large portion of that, and 40% of the land is designated for residential. Low-density residential is the predominant residential land use type, and there's also medium density and multifamily. Commercial land uses make up just over 30% of the land. Industrial uses make up 12%, as does open space. And public or quasi-public uses make up approximately 4%. And on this map, this is our current land use map that shows where all these different land use designations are located. This map will be updated to reflect some of the changes that I mentioned that have taken place during 2007. Next, please. So there are some overlay zones in the city which have been in place and do need to be updated as part of the land use element. And as I mentioned before, the village specific plan, although it was adopted in 2007, it has been amended. So we need to include the land uses that were designated for it. This particular property, which is well underway to being developed, includes commercial, hotel, residential, and parks and open space uses. So we will reflect those uses in the land use element. Next, please. The Avenue Flag Specific Plan was adopted in 2017 to guide the transformation of the Avenue flags. The goals and policies encourage this development by activating the medians, calming traffic, enhancing safety for pedestrians via crosswalks and pathways, strategic building massing, providing park-like improvements, and creating destination places on the medians and along the adjacent roadway frontages. So the goals and policies and design standards that were adopted as part of the Avenue Flag Specific Plan will be added to the land use element by this update. And as I also mentioned, the AHA sites, we had 10 of them that were designated in the city. I'm sorry, 9. Were identified in the existing land use element. 4 of these have been developed. 2 were developed for residential projects, which would have been for Juliet Walk and Avenue Heights Apartments. This is on 2nd Street. And 2 were developed for non-residential projects, the Hampton Inn and the Waypoint project. This is the current name of the bowling alley, and the entitlements are approved for this and construction is pending. So the developed land use categories will be incorporated into the land use element update. And next. So this is just a map that shows where all of our AHA sites are, and as I mentioned, we have 4 of these sites that were built out. In case you're not familiar with Juliet Walk, it's along Highway 246. It's a residential project. The Waypoint is down here on the eastern portion of Highway 246, Avenue Heights Apartments, 2nd Street, right here, and the Hampton Inn is up on Murray. And with that, I'm available, as are other staff members, for any questions and answers that, questions that the group may have for us, and we hope to be able to provide you with answers. And if you think of any more questions after the workshop, please email them to the planning department or put them on the chat, and we will compile them and put a report together that has all the questions and try and answer them the best that we can.
So I'm seeing David's hand raised, so I'm going to unmute David, and then I'll go to Hudson Hornick after. David, you should be able to.
My question is, where do you consider the demographic changes? Where the city is going to have more and more retired people, and how do you consider that in your land use, and how you allocate city resources?
So the changing demographics will be part of the more comprehensive land use element update that will occur over the next few years, that will culminate in 2025. This current update is a focused update that is a cleanup of items that need to be incorporated into the land use element as a result of state laws, and also to reflect changes, actual physical development that has occurred in the community. So we will not be doing a comprehensive update to reflect demographics at this juncture, but watch for it as in the next few years as the more comprehensive update will be taking place.
Well, I have in mind some of the facilities that the city is going to need to provide. The Williamson property would be an ideal place to maybe take care of some of the things that are going to change. Library, for instance, the kids, senior citizens. I just wonder how that works into your land use, because it's going to change the mix in this city.
So if you have some of these issues that you're already thinking about, and it sounds like you have thought about this, please provide those to us via email so that we can have them on record, so that as we go through the process, if there are some that we can address during this update that are appropriate for this update, we will. But we will take the more broad issues that a demographic change in the community would represent. We will definitely be taking a look at that during the comprehensive land use element update. So please submit them to the planning department.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to unmute Hudson Hornick.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I really have two questions. The first one is, I guess I'm kind of a little bit confused as to what this hearing is for. Is this is a public comment as to land use planning overlays in general, or what is exactly that we're doing?
So we are updating two elements in the city's general plan. We are updating the land use element, and it consists of just a focused update, basically a cleanup of items that have happened and issues that need to be addressed during this period. And we're doing a more comprehensive update of the circulation element as part of this update.
Okay, so these land use, these plans have already been approved and they were statutorily mandated some time ago, and this is what, just getting public comment on the affordable housing overlay and whatever else that has already been approved. Is that right?
We are asking for input from the community, and as we go through this presentation tonight, there are some specific issues that we will be asking the community to comment on.
Okay.
So the items that we're doing as a cleanup for the land use element, those are already the projects that have been approved, but we are going to be looking at opportunities that we have and addressing what our issues are moving forward so that we can be addressing those as we go through the more comprehensive update in the next few years.
Okay, thank you. My only other question was this affordable housing overlay sites, the one at the Waypoint Bowling Alley, you say, in Hampton Inn. So I'm confused as to how those are affordable housing overlays.
So there were 9 sites identified in the city that were suitable for a housing overlay zone to be in place. The way that the housing overlay zone were established is that they allowed for a higher density of development on these sites, regardless of the underlying zoning. However, if somebody were to come in to develop the site per the underlying zoning, such as what happened, for instance, on the Hampton Inn, which is on McMurray and DeMassa, so that had a AHAS overlay on it, but the site was zoned commercial. So the developer, the applicant that came in, desired to build a hotel. So the hotel could be developed without having to build residential. So if an applicant wanted to come in and build residential, such as what happened at Juliet Walk, then this AHAS overlay would kick in, and they would be building per the affordable housing parameters that were laid out under the AHAS ordinance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm seeing Carol Erickson Lonas raised hand, so I'm going to ask to unmute her. Unless she does not want to speak. So let's go to Larry Bishop.
Well, thank you. Irma, this doesn't have to do with, well, I guess it has to do with AZON's site build out, but in the village project, and I guess that'd be number 4 in what you have on your screen share, project number 4 or site number 4. I was noticing that the Tumbelina neighborhood is excluded from from passing through that area to go to the park. And as I recall, and this has to do with as it was built, not when it's future built, but as was committed to, that Tumbelina would have access to that park via Glengarry. Is it Glengarry? But what I've noticed is that gate is locked. So nobody, it is only allowed as an emergency access by fire personnel or whatever. And there's no access except by going out onto 246 and coming around to that park. I think in violation of the agreement that in exchange for moving the park from the Glengarry connection there over to the park area behind the shopping center. So I'm trying to find out, why you have blocked off, or why has the city blocked off access from the Tumbelina area, especially on the north side, to the park.
So thank you for that question. And the city is actually aware of this situation, and we are working with the developer of that particular project that was recently completed. They had that gate locked during construction because of safety issues, and as the townhome development has become occupied and finalized, and as they're finishing out building that portion of the specific plan, and we are working with the developer to make sure that the requirements for that access be observed. So that's actually in progress, and it's really not something that's part of the land use element.
Right, yeah, I understand.
But I'm glad that you're bringing it to our attention as well, and we are actively working on it.
Yeah, and actually, I'll just chime in really quickly. I believe as of a couple days ago, the gate that you've previously seen should be removed. I think it was a couple days ago it was removed. So there should be access through there now, just as a, at least access through to McMurray Road from Glenora.
Okay, I'm going to try to unmute Carol again.
Unmute myself. Can you
Okay.
hear me now?
We can hear you.
I just had a question that is probably more about process, but I was just curious. For instance, the specific plan for Avenue of the Flags, can it be further amended during these updating processes? Or is once a specific plan approved, is it set in stone, sort of no matter what?
Thank you for that question. So the specific plan is not being updated as part of this process. It was recently approved, and we are incorporating the approved plan into the land use element. However, any specific plan in town, as the general plan itself, can be amended at any time, as you know, based upon a request and a substantiated need for that type of an update. So no, we are not looking at an update now. It's possible that some issues may come up in the future that the city will take a look at that, but that is not being considered at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Len Fleckenstein, who's raising his hand. I'm going to unmute him.
Okay, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. A question about the Williamson property, maybe just as an example, but you had mentioned purchasing the Williamson property is something that's new and has since the general plan was developed. So my question is simply whether you envision a decision being made during this plan update process, a decision as to which category that property, which one or more categories that property would be put into, or do you see the general plan simply being updated to say that kind of decision needs to be made?
So a little bit further in this presentation, we will actually go through a little bit more detail on the Williamson property, but just briefly, we are asking for input from the community in terms of what they would like to see. I know the city council this is something that they are going to be looking at as well, and they're in the process of starting that review. So it's something that if all of the factors come together, we can, reflect what is being discussed as part of the Williamson property. But because it's a city-owned parcel at this point, we will reflect that at a minimum in the land use update. So, but Kara is going to have a nice presentation on the Williamson property, and there will be further opportunity to discuss this in just a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay, we can take one more question, and I see Jerry's hand is raised. And then after we'll go on a short break. So I'm gonna ask, oh, and I lost him. Okay. Looks like don't see any more raised hands. If anybody has any more questions.
Yep. Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
Alrighty. So we thought it would be a good idea to take a 5-minute break, just in case some people need to, stretch their legs or get a glass of water. So,
I'm sorry, Irma, but Jerry's hand is raised again. He may be ready now.
okay. Unmute.
Okay.
Okay, am I working now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There were several things I'm going to say, but I'm going to put most of them on hold for another time, maybe an insight, a visit in there. But on the calming traffic on the avenue that you're working against, there seems to be, to me, a lot of problems there. Where does that new project, for example, where the story poles are, I'm not sure how they're going to enter that project and then how they come out of that project. Because that little area right there at the bottom of 2nd Street on that side is overused right now as we speak. And there's accidents there a lot. They don't all get reported. For example, I was in one just about 3 weeks ago, and it was sizable. And so now how are we going to get the project in there, people into that project, and then back out without going onto an overworked avenue? And this avenue has been overlooked for years and years, since I was a planning commissioner. That was, 10 years ago, and I was 1 for 10. And so the only way off of that avenue would be to go through 2nd Street all the time, down to 2nd Street. There is no way until you get to 246 or all the way up further. So it's just gonna, and every time a new project that involves kids moving in, like we have them back at Tractor Supply, which is different than originally was approved, but not the fact going out in the new Chumash part, they have to all, including Thumbelina and everyone else, get their kids up to the grammar school and the junior high, which we have the only one. The most used route is 2nd Street, and it keeps getting ignored on what you're going to do. For example, of the 1,800 plus cars that go by my house every single day. But I'm not the only one trying to get onto 2nd. We have that whole, which was about the 2nd track built in Buellton after Thumbelina. It was built in 3 phases. And so this needs to get looked at. Every time you okay a project for that area, you just apply more traffic to this area, and all of the little roads, like Kalora and all those, they have to get onto 2nd to turn to go to work as well. So that needs to be really looked at, and I'm concerned about the new project. I don't see anything where it shows how they're going to enter and go out. The Chumash project in the back, they have 2 ways. So that was my question. The other one I'm going to put on hold for this another time. I'll probably come in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question, and you covered many issues there, and traffic is an issue that we're looking at, and which is one of the reasons that we are doing a more comprehensive update of the circulation element. And it's precisely the type of things that we're going to be looking at, how the performance of our local streets, how well they're functioning. So perhaps there may be more information that will address this later on in the presentation. But I know specifically as we go through the update process, potential problems and the traffic volumes on the streets are going to be addressed in terms of what those are and what the options are that we have available to us. Are there any more questions?
I see David's hand is raised. I'm going to go and unmute him now.
Okay, quick question. What does AHOZ mean on your chart?
That is Affordable Housing Overlay Zone.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And one more from Larry Bishop. This is going to be our last question. Actually. Okay. hold that. I don't see the hand raised. So if Larry, if you had a question, if you could hold off for the next Q&A, and we'll take a quick 5-minute break. Come back to the next portion.
Okay. People a chance to get seated again.
Looks like most people are here.
Okay. So, Kara,
Okay.
hold the mic.
Okay. So thanks everybody for making it this far. Hopefully we're going to get into some really good input opportunities here. We're going to be talking about what land uses we want to see in the city for the future, and then later Rose is going to be covering the circulation and some of the issues and opportunities there. So now that you hopefully have a better understanding of what types of land uses are in the city, I'm going to be asking about your vision, what you want to see in the future. So think to 2045 if that's possible. But I want you to think about what your perfect town looks like. Think about Buellton being self-sufficient and everything close by. So what types of businesses matter to you that might be missing in Buellton? Manufacturing, more office space. What about retail, like shopping, restaurants, grocers? Or how about service businesses like childcare, banks, medical services? So as I'm speaking, you can provide comments in the chat, or you can save your thoughts about what you want to see more of until the Q&A. And then what about housing? So there's a lot of different types of housing, and as Irma, I think, had covered, single-family housing is the most dominant in Buellton, but there's a lot of other types of housing that might lend themselves better to other living situations and other income levels, and we know that it can be really costly living here. So depending on whether owning your own home or renting is important to you, how about a townhome, duplex? What about accessory dwelling units, like a backyard cottage or garage conversions? And there's also mixed use, like apartments on top of a commercial building. And what about tiny house communities or co-housing developments where the residents own the building and run the co-housing? So then there's other land uses. There's open space and parks, agriculture, educational facilities, recreational opportunities like trails, sports fields, gyms, museums. Again, think of your perfect town and what types of land uses Buellton still needs to help achieve that vision. So you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so now that you've gotten some idea of what you want to see more of, we'll come to the how of it. How we'll fit it all in. And there are three major ways to do so. The first and most obvious would be to develop vacant parcels left in town. These are limited, so we have to make sure that they're zoned correctly for what we want, that they allow what we want to see in the city still. So then the second way to fit all of our desired land uses in would be to redevelop lots with existing structures. These lots could be underdeveloped and have space to accommodate new development, or the existing structures could be converted into new uses, like old warehouses into restaurants, or the buildings could be rehabilitated or remodeled to accommodate more intensity of the use, or even a mix of uses, like housing on top of commercial. And the third and final way is to expand our borders. So right now, the city does have the urban growth boundary, the UGB, until 2025, and residents have to vote in order to amend or expand this boundary. You can go to the next slide. So in Buellton, there are a total of 88 acres of undeveloped land. And while that sounds like a lot, we'll look at some of these parcels. So the vacant lands that are zoned right now for general commercial are shown here in pink. And I've highlighted some of these in the pictures here. So the zoning designation allows for commercial retail, wholesale, office uses, and mixed-use development with residential and commercial. So most of these lots are included in the AHOZ sites, the Affordable Housing Overlay Zone. And this again allows the developer to develop the lot fully residentially with 25 acres or 25 units per acre, and a requirement that 20% of the housing must be affordable to those making under the area median income. So look around to some of these parcels. I'm sure you recognize many of them. And think of what, maybe if you've passed them, what you think should go there, what it should be developed as. We'll go to the next slide. So the next is vacant service commercial parcels, shown in red, or the darker pink here. So these parcels, as they're zoned right now, could facilitate commercial and light industrial uses, like furniture stores, car sales, farm and ranch supply stores, lumber stores. So 2 of these parcels are located at the beginning of Industrial Way, and then the others are up at the north end of town, mostly on McMurray. So again, what do you want to see here? Are they zoned correctly for that? Yeah, next slide, thank you. Okay, so the few industrial zone parcels we have now that are vacant are all towards the south end of town between Riverview Park and Rancho de Maria. These tend to be larger. 3 of these parcels are to the south of the wastewater treatment plant. 1 of them is at the end of Industrial Way there, and then another is right adjacent to Rancho de Maria and the golf course. So with all of those sites, I will take questions and comments. And just be thinking about your desired land uses, your vision for the future.
Okay, I see Hudson Hornick has raised his hand. Okay, Hudson, will. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. I just wanted to raise just a point that Industrial Ave, industrially zoned parcel was already approved for a project, right? It's called the Hub, and that's a mixed-use project with light industrial. Is that right?
That's right, and some residential.
Right, like 50 units residential, but some mixed use and light industrial, right? So it's still zoned industrial, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so you're taking questions on what we'd like to see with the parcels, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Or question.
I would submit a bid to turn it into a park, but that's me.
That's a perfect comment. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay. And I see Jerry has raised his hand. Another question, Jerry? You can unmute. There you go.
Okay, you have me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sometimes I have problems on my end with that part. I just
Okay.
want to say one thing on the part of the restaurants and stuff like that. A lot of people want to see those, but we've done workshops on that, like why didn't we have Trader Joe's here, or why didn't we have so and so here? They base that on the amount of people that are in your area that would come eat there, and they count all the way from the other end of the valley, all the way to Lompoc, and it's sometimes even commuters. And with that many people, we still don't meet what they need to have to open their doors and make a living. And 2 of our main restaurants here in town are barely doing that when there's no pandemic. And so restaurants are really hard. You got most everyone here, especially up above my area in the new developments up there, those people are pretty high up in the $3,000 and close to $4,000 a month house payments, and two families working, coming home to feed their kids. They can't afford to go out. So that was tallied in there. So that's all I want to put in there on the restaurant part. It's really not something people can do in here and make money other than the little tiny ones, like one new one that's in here I like. But and then on the same goes with the with my opinion on mixed use. It takes a long time to rent out what's down below, because if they don't put an elevator in, you limit your people to younger people. If people can't carry groceries up 2 flights of stairs to get there, or even one in some cases, and then another flight up to their wherever. So those things need to be kept in mind, and that's why one developer that I know very well, he had a hard time. He couldn't get rid of the ones upstairs and turn them into apartments instead of housing or whatever condos it's going to be. And then also get the bottom. So those things have to be taken into consideration. We're not a huge town, and a lot of them commute out of town, and we can't support that. And you can drive around now and see at the mixed use part, there is so many vacant buildings over there in the area of Tractor Supply and stuff. And so that's just my comment. Doesn't mean anything. You don't even have to listen. I just tell you what we faced in the past. I have not seen it get better until now, and that's my 24 years living here, and I'd like to see all that, but I'm not sure it's something to put a lot of thought into. I'm done. I'm not going to cause any more trouble.
Yeah, thank you. I'm taking lots of notes here. So
Yeah. We do have a question from Judy Stoffer. So, Judy, if you would like to ask your question, and hopefully you're unmuted.
Yeah. I was just wondering to what extent you all are following what's going on with Santa Barbara's downtown in terms of kind of the retail space, rethinking about pedestrian areas, kind of wider areas for outdoor dining. Being now, of course, we're in the pandemic, but they're also considering extending that farther out just because it's been so popular.
I've been following it a bit. I see how they've closed a portion of State Street, and a lot of people are just out and about and eating at restaurants, and we've allowed a lot of that outdoor dining in Buellton when restaurants come to us and want to expand outdoors. As far as making that more permanent, I know we're looking at that for the Avenue of Flags. Maybe a portion of that, or especially on the medians, making that kind of outdoor dining and recreation experience on the avenue. But are there places, Judy, that you see that could benefit from that?
Well, my thought was more just in terms of, as the avenue gets developed, and I know you're planning to, have sidewalk areas that are X wide, but if you're thinking about, perhaps even widening it more, I know you're already down the road pretty far as far as what you're planning for the Avenue of Flags and redoing your medians and things like that, but just making it so that it's much more pedestrian friendly as opposed to still kind of major roadway coming off of the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is definitely something we're looking at doing with the avenue as development comes in.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see Larry Bishop has raised his hand also. So you'll need to unmute. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, just briefly, as far as vacant industrial parcels, I'm suggesting that the Buellton move as part of the green team that Buellton move towards safe energy, renewable energy industries by working with either solar or battery installing industries to invite them in to the city and as to attract them is that the city would develop a number of energy or clean energy projects on city properties, whether it's solar panels or battery backup facilities, such that they would provide an initial business to a solar or a safe energy facilities moving into the city.
Are there any parcels that you see that might accommodate that better?
Okay.
Now I can unmute. Okay. Yeah. So I would, it seems like over there by Todd Pipe and Supply, there's a number of facilities in that area that would welcome more business and on McMurray Road. But it's not something that is very, very big, but I think it is basically, they do need a reason to come to the central part of Santa Barbara County to set up shop. There are solar companies within the valley that, if attracted by Buellton contracts, would set up shop in Buellton. And I'm just thinking that existing buildings, it wouldn't be a vacant, wouldn't be a vacant parcel unless they're setting up a solar field of some sort.
Right. I know that there are other people that have some questions, but if we can just perhaps take a note of those, make a note for yourself and wait until our next Q&A session. We need to move on to our next, actually, Kara has a very interesting presentation for us next up on opportunities that we can look at, that we'd like your feedback on as well.
So I know this has been mentioned already. So this is the Williamson property, 202 Dairyland Road. So back in April, at the end of April, the city bought this parcel, and it has no set plans for it yet, but that's why we wanted to ask you here today what you want to see done with that property. So there's a historic barn on it. It used to be the Williamson Dairy Farm. And that whole Meadow Ridge subdivision was the dairy farm. And the house on it is a 3,400 square foot home. And the whole land that we have is about 23 acres. So there's the upper parcels with the home and the barn and some outbuildings. And that's zoned right now as residential single family. And then there's the lower parcel that's about 20 acres of just zoned open space right now. So we have a video, a virtual tour for you that we will open up here, and hopefully you'll get a better sense of what's out there. have a little Q&A. Hope you got a sense of kind of what the house looks like, the barn, the workshop, the back of the property. So.
Okay, I think Carol has had her hand up from the last Q&A, so I'd like to give her a chance to quickly ask her question and then see if there's other participants. So go ahead, Carol. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, I'm unmuted, right?
Now you're good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Actually, this sort of links to my other question, which was, the map was so small I couldn't really see it really well, but I was just wondering, the industrial parcels to the south, are the trail that is being developed, does that go through, or could it go through part of those industrial parcels, or is that trail south of those parcels? And then obviously could link up to the Williamson property as well.
Yeah, so that the Williamson property is definitely part of the planned trail system, as are all the parcels that line the river there. So the industrial parcels that you saw on the vacant land maps earlier, those definitely have portions down more towards the river that we would, any development that was there, we would ask for a trail easement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. See, Pam Nico has her hand up as well. And you could unmute yourself too. Perfect.
Yes, hi. First, I want to applaud the city for seeing the future and buying the Williamson property. But also, so kind of a self-interest bet. So, as you know, the Buellton Senior Center has definitely outgrown their senior center. And during COVID, in driving around and looking for a place, it occurred to me that the library needs a place that would be more desirable for particularly young families to go and use the library and just have it a fun place to go. And it would seem that a good use for the Williamson house would be to put the library over there, and then they could tie in with programs for the botanical gardens. They could tie in with the park. They have like, I know the Williamson had like chickens, things like that. I know that some of the people have talked about raised gardens. That all is very family orientated to have the library there. And so families could bring kids over and just have a really pleasant place to be in the Williamson house. And then, then if the library moved over to there, the senior center could move into the library, and because it's right next to the existing building that we have, it would expand our services, expand some of the room that we would have for a medical room and for a dining room, and that would be wonderful. But mostly, I think that just getting families out in the trails, and it would just be a really good idea for the library as well.
Okay. Thank you. I see Chris Churgwin has hand up too. There we go. There we go.
There we go. Thank you very much for putting on this opportunity for us to provide some input. So I'd like to just talk briefly about the lower parcel, since it's zoned open space, and my understanding is that it's adjacent to the existing Riverview Park. That lower parcel could be a really good place for sports fields, a baseball or softball or soccer fields for the youth in our community to have a place to actually go practice and have games and just play in that area. So I'd be an advocate for that type of usage.
Okay. All right, thank you. Hudson Hornick. Let's see. Is Hudson with us?
Hi, I'm here. Yeah, thanks for unmuting me.
Okay.
I just wanted to say two things. One, as it relates to the trailhead proposal that I forget who asked about. I mentioned in the chat, but one of the proposed trailheads does cut right through that area zoned industrial that's next to Rancho de Maria and Industrial Way. It's still in the initial planning phases right now, though, so there's a bunch of proposed comments for that, but I did want to just let her know. But also, I really like Pam Nico's idea about using that as a library. I was also thinking of creative ways that we could use that space, and one of them, I'm not sure how we would effectuate this, but I think one of the ways we could do it is have some kind of community garden or ag land there, community farming, just to make accessible for children and just to learn about sort of the agricultural process here that's, just throughout the valley. I mean, maybe they'll get that anyway, but I just think it'd be a prime spot for that.
Okay. Gosh, we have a lot of hands up. So we got Hudson. Let's see, Teresa. Teresa?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I just want to stand in support of development of the multi-use trail along the river. And even if it doesn't go out of the way to solving, at this point, if we had something viable off-road where we had walking trails, biking trails, just up from the river, from Riverview Park to downtown, so that we could stay off of the highways, that would be greatly utilized by all ages. So I want to support that. And the barn itself, I would love to see as an art, music, performance, cultural center, kind of the way that the Presbyterian uses their multi-use building, where it's flexible. You can set up exhibits, you can have a stage area, so an cultural enrichment kind of a thing. And I love Pam's idea of then families being able to use the house adjacent, community gardening. I could see it as a tremendous community resource. So that's what I would like to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I know, so Len? Let's see, we need to unmute you. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I also echo comments about appreciating the city purchasing the property. I think it was a very wise decision. And I like a lot of the ideas that I've heard about the use of the property. I guess I just want to, on the other hand, offer a word of caution, and then I'll have a question. It sounds like about 3 acres of the property are zoned as residential. I think it is important to recognize that neighbors in the development have purchased their homes expecting that this property would have remained residential, or not expecting it to change dramatically. So I think we need to take that into account. And I think it's important that the kinds of property uses we've talked about not be ones that would cause local residents to be up in arms about the change. So I think we don't want a space that becomes used for loud events, for example. So the kinds of things I've heard so far would not do that, but I think we just that needs to be taken into account. So my question then is, what is the process for changing zoning from something like especially from residential to something that would have more of an intensive use?
So first we need to take a look at the overall general plan policies as it relates to the property and what the vision is for the property, and incorporate that into the general plan document. And from that would flow an update of the zoning ordinance that would reflect those specific uses. But right now we're still at the visioning stage for that property.
But my question is, if a decision were to be made to change a residential property, let's assume it was not this property, but my neighbor's property, from residential to some other use, is there a defined process in place for that to happen?
There is. There's a general plan amendment and a zoning code amendment process that an applicant and property owner could go through. For instance, if there was a project that they would like to see on a piece of property that they would like to develop, that is a process that's available.
And does that require neighbors' involvement in that process?
It would go through a public hearing process that would be noticed to the neighbors.
Okay.
So there's a radius that within which the neighbors would get notice of the intended development and have an opportunity to come and comment on it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Len.
The time is 7:30, and I know we have a few more hands raised, but if we wanted to move on to circulation, and if everybody who has their hands raised could either comment in the chat or email us. And so we do want to get to circulation, but we do want to hear your comments or questions too.
Yep. Okay. So we could go on to the next slide, and Rose will take over the presentation in this section.
Thank you very much, Irma. My name is Rose Hess. I'm the Director of Public Works, and we're going to go over the circulation element. And we're going to, I have Q&A in my slide here, but in light of the time, we're going to skip through. I'll try to go through our presentation as quickly as possible to allow us some more time for Q&A at the end of my segment here. So just generally, we're going to go and provide an overview of the circulation element, discuss our transportation network, and provide some background as to what we plan to...
Claire is muted, so I'm not sure if...
Are we not? Oops.
Rose is...
Are we still muted, Claire? I need to be unmuted? Yeah, because... Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
I heard you before. That was the problem. Okay.
Okay. I will start over. I'm going to skip the Q&A section on the presentation for now, just in light of time, go over the general overview regarding the circulation element, and I'll try to be brief throughout it so that would allow us some more time, hopefully at the end of my segment, to answer additional questions and comments and so on. But generally speaking, for the circulation element, we're going to be providing an overview for that section. We'll go over the transportation network, and we'll provide the background for the circulation element update, go over some general vision for it, and then discuss how we move forward with our assessments. Next slide, Claire. So generally, what is the circulation element? Quite similar to general plan, this is the blueprint for the transportation portion within the city. This element will guide the city's planning process for improving roads, bike paths, sidewalks, and transit, looking at multimodal facilities for the city. We want to provide goals for the city with respect to transportation, both locally and regionally. And we want to incorporate the federal, state, regional, and local regulations, policies, and plans that's been developed. And finally, we want to identify projects and programs that we're going to implement all of the above. Next slide. So there's 4 aspects to our transportation network that we review throughout the evaluation process. We're going to go over all of our roads, look at aspects from a bicycle mode of transportation. We'll review it from a pedestrian standpoint, and also look at mass transit. So just going over generally, next slide, for our transportation network, going over detail for the roads. For a small city that we are, we have a variety of different road types, from the local residential roads, we have commercial and industrial roads, we have collectors of both residential and commercial industrial sectors. A little bit larger roads, we have arterials, which include McMurray and Avenue flags. And of course, we have the fortunate case to have 2 Caltrans facilities bisecting our town. We have State Route 246 and Highway 101. I've also identified, categorized which are local, obviously looking at the residential through arterials, and which roads we consider regional, which will connect our town to other local agencies and surrounding communities. Next slide. As far as our bicycle portion of our transportation network, we are implementing different plans that we've reviewed over the years. In 2012, we've had the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan for the City of Buellton, which rolled out several projects to make sure we start implementation as soon as we can, with the inclusion of the Highway 246 bike lanes. We've improved bike lanes on Avenue flags, bike lanes on McMurray Road, and the sharrows that are on 2nd Street and Shadow Mountain Drive. We're also going to incorporate recent plans, such as the 2019 Santa Ynez Valley Bicycle Master Plan, in which the city participated in, and that updates our bicycle network and allows for a little regional connectivity and discussion for implementation. So our goal is to normalize the use of bicycling as a means for transportation. We are a small community. We are a rural community, and we want to make the most of that quality that we do have. And as part of our bicycle program, we want to continue to educate and encourage bicycle as an alternative form of transportation. The city's been implementing education and outreach, both local and valley-wide. We've been working to implement other facilities, such as the Riverview Park Skills Courts, which the council had approved and budgeted, and we've already started seeing developments with that, with the first phase, and we've had some residents been able to partake in that, in both development and use of it afterwards. Our recreation has programs that encourage bicycle outings and skills, and we're also partnering with SB Bike as far as having a valley-wide bicycle education outreach program. And our goal also is to complete and continue to implement infrastructure for cyclists throughout the city. Next slide just provides us an overview of the existing bicycle facilities. We do have Class 2 and Class 3 bike lanes in town. Class 2 being a pavement marked and signed bike lane, designated bike lane. And Class 3 is it more share the road. We've got some signage with the sharrows on the ground, perhaps some signing, but it's more shared facility with the vehicles on our local roads. Next slide. So as far as pedestrians, to be said, we want to make sure that we're able to walk around our community and get to our different points of designation. We want to ensure that there's sidewalks throughout the city, and make sure we plan for maintenance and improvements, and make sure they're ADA accessible as well, with handicap ramps, appropriate slopes, and access to various facilities. And included in that are also trails through the San Ynez River and through areas along our creeks as we can implement. Next slide. And so the next portion for our network is, my screen stopped here, all of our transit. So we are fortunate to have several transit facilities that serve our community, including San Ynez Valley Transit, which has a subsidized dial-a-ride program for our seniors, and that provides travel and connectivity throughout the valley. We have the Wine Country Express, which is generally an east-west transit direction to the cities of Lompoc, Buellton, and to Solvang. And we have a Breeze 200 and a Clean Air Express, which is more traveling between north and south. Breeze 200 is primarily from Santa Maria to Buellton to Solvang in the valley. It makes that triangular connection. And Clean Air Express takes them from from Santa Maria to Buellton to Santa Barbara. And of course, lastly, we have Amtrak, which provides the connection through Lompoc and further points north. The next slide provides us a map of the existing transportation network for our transit services. We're fortunate to have stops throughout different locations of the city. And one of the other items regarding the transit, though the city doesn't operate any of these facilities, we do participate in the annual Unmet Transit Needs Study that the SBCAG, our Association of Governments for Transportation, hosts annually in different locations between Santa Maria, Lompoc, Santa Barbara, and the Valley area. And that process solicits additional recommendations or requests from the community as far as additional transit needs. So why are we doing the circulation element update? As with all of our other elements for the general plan, it's a little bit outdated. 2006, 2007 was the last element update. We've had several new developments that have been approved or in construction in the queue since that time frame. We've had the village-specific plan, we've had industrial business parks and different projects, commercial areas, and bowling alleys. So we've got different types of land uses and points of destinations that's been approved and in the queue or have been constructed since that time. And we want to make sure that we've got the appropriate points of connectivity to make sure it's accessible to everybody. So again, with the new destinations, we've got change in uses in different locations. You know, we've got tasting rooms popping up in industrial areas where we hadn't had before. Same thing with residents. We've got new parks. So we've got not just new uses, but changed uses throughout the community. So that changes the way we want to look at the points of destination for the town. And as mentioned previously, there's several new studies that's occurred over the years, and we want to make sure that those goals and objectives are implemented and part of our goals and priorities and programs in the general plan. We've got the vision plan from 2012, the bicycle and pedestrian master plan from 2012. That was the roll-off from the vision plan. Again, that mentioned the San Ynez Valley bicycle master plan. We've recently had the San Ynez Valley Traffic Circulation and Safety Study and SBCAG's 2040 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, which is a regional study that we have participated in as well. And then lastly, there are new regulations that we have to comply with. Most notably, AB 1385, which is the Complete Streets Act. Although it's not formally adopted in the past in our circulation element, it's the concept and philosophies that we've tried to encourage and implement with our projects and improvement plans over the years. So this is the point in time which we want to formalize that and make sure it's part of our goals and policies. And then there's SB 743, which is a roll-off of SB 375, which are mainly environmental in trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it changes the way in which we review traffic impacts. It's focused more on environmental aspects and mobility focus. And generally speaking, we just want to make the circulation element relevant and current for us to focus on. So next slide. So I just want to point things in as we move forward. When we do our evaluation process and look at recommendations and implementation for policies in the future, things we want to make sure that we include in the circulation element is to have safe programs, safe streets, safe access for our community. We want our plans and improvements to be efficient. We want to preserve the city's small town character. We don't want highways, obviously, but we don't want just concrete juggle. We like our small town character and quality of life. We want to make sure the improvements are balanced, and this plays hand in hand with looking at circulation and transportation with the land use proposed and projects that come in. We've had one of our residents mentioned in the past earlier in this presentation, talk about what's being developed in certain locations, and if that generates a lot of traffic and it's all concentrated on the same road because they're all trying to get to the same school, and how can we make this a little bit more balanced throughout our city. And we want to make sure we meet the needs of all the users, from all age ranges, from children to our seniors, with all capable points of access. We want to make sure that the study incorporates multimodal review. So again, we want, it's not just from a standpoint of looking at vehicular access, but through bicycle, pedestrian, and transit. And then, of course, lastly, we want to make sure that we incorporate sustainability in our progress forward, incorporate the green streets, and looking at the other environmental aspects that is impacted with transportation, which really essentially boils down to like the greenhouse gas emissions and more obviously water quality. Next slide. So where do we start? We look at the existing conditions and evaluate those conditions. We're looking at traffic counts. We've got a little bit of a different way we're having to go about that at this point in time because of COVID. The traffic isn't your normal pattern as we've had in the past. So how do we go about doing that at this point in juncture? We're collecting all the counts that we've had from different projects that's gone through the system where we've done traffic counts locally at intersections and different locations throughout the city. We're using available data from other sources, counts that Caltrans has on Highway 246, maybe on and off ramps Highway 101, reports that other agencies have done for the region, looking at traffic like circulation with the SBCAG reports, different traffic safety studies that we've done, and so on. So we're trying to collect as much data as we possibly can, trying to correlate all of that information together. We also look at the accident history throughout town. Safety is an important element for the circulation studies. We want to know where the accidents are occurring and what type of accidents, what were they, vehicles to vehicles, pedestrian, incidents, bicycle incidents, what was the type, and what was the cause of the accident. So we're looking at those type of root cause to see if something stands out or if they're just all a true accident and anomaly. But if there's something that develops as a pattern, we definitely want to make sure that gets addressed in our future planning. Performance is another criteria that we looked at for conditions assessments. Most commonly known is the performance of level of service. And we'll get into details as to what that is too. So in this portion, we're looking at level of service. And then we're reviewing different critical intersections. And the next slide, you'll see we've identified 14 different intersections throughout the city to start looking at peak hours, level of service, and trying to determine, provide evaluations based on its performance. So I'll go a little detail about this performance measure. Level of service, I said, it's the most common and known to public. And next slide, Claire. And it's based on average daily traffic volume, the speed of travel, and essentially the delay that is experienced at these intersections. And after analyzing all that data, it assigns a letter grade to evaluate how the intersection performs. Basically, if you have a level service A, you have very few delays at 10 seconds or less, and traffic's pretty much free-flowing. Typically speaking, delays of more than 80 seconds, which isn't really that long of a time, it's a little less than a minute and a half of delay, is considered a level service F. And just for your edification, there's pictures in the bottom that you can see the difference. Level service A, it's empty, it's free flow of traffic, whereas people normally associate level service F with congestion and slow speeds of travel. And for this existing evaluation, we are using level service, even though we will be moving towards VMT, which is vehicle miles traveled, a different form of evaluation as we move through actually adopting measures for the circulation element. We're using this method just because it's familiar, and when we're dealing and trying to explain the current situation, it's most common to the public. But as we move forward, we're going to try to create a transition and help explain, how we're changing the way we look. One of the issues I did want to bring up with the level of service, because there's a kind of intrinsic problem with this type of evaluation, and namely, it depends on your perspective and the goal of what you want to accomplish. So, for example, speed versus congestion. The idea you can have free flow, you get a faster time between getting from point A to point B. Or are you really trying to slow down that road for safety, or in respect to the downtown areas, you want the traffic to go slower, if you have more business exposure in addition to more pedestrian areas. And of course, looking at level service alone, one of the problems is that it doesn't really take into consideration other modes of transportation, and it almost paints them in a negative light. For example, free flow of traffic can be affected by areas with lots of pedestrian and bike traffic, where you're trying to share the road. And when your delay is increased, it gives a lower level of service, but it kind of sheds a negative light as far as using the alternative transportation. So there's different ways and aspects to look at it. So one of the things we want to do, even though we're moving to VNTs, is obviously still keep that discussion with level of service. So it's something people understand. It continues to keep us with a different way to look at the situation. So what is the VMT? That was the new item we're incorporating because of the legislation that's been adopted. VMT is vehicle miles traveled. So it's based really on the distance traveled and accounts for the number of vehicle trips generated and the length or distance of those trips. So it's not really based on, it's very different from LOS in that it evaluates the transportation as it impacts in the environment, whereas the LOS evaluates the transportation based on its impact to the driver, if that makes sense, hopefully. If not, we can try to clarify a little later. And so it's definitely environmental based. The goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It encourages multimodal transportation network. But the issue we're going to have to go through and develop throughout this process is creating a local criteria and thresholds for us to review and evaluate projects as they move through. Our goal, as I mentioned earlier, is to still kind of keep level of service and have like an equivalency chart or something to try to help evaluate the two. So next slide. Okay, I will rush through. We're going to identify the gaps and needs, and my font does change throughout the slide. The first one, it's small because it's relatively easy to do. We're implementing the studies and all the plans that's been adopted locally and regionally over the past few years. So off of that, it's very easy to identify the projects and implement. The next is evaluating the regulatory compliance. It's a bigger effort. We want to make sure we implement complete streets. We want to and we need to evaluate based on VMT. And then also we need to evaluate the plan with social equity and equal access for all. And we'll get into more of what that means a little bit later in the presentation with Irma. And then lastly, which is most important, we're evaluating the circulation element, trying to identify the public's concerns and issues. We want to review safety, we want the outreach and comments from the community, and we have questions in the surveys that we're trying to put out and reach out to the community. So that's where we definitely encourage the participation. You know, as a city, we evaluate all the roads. We want to maintain, and we're trying to be responsive and collect all the information as we get issues or complaints or things that arise, and we keep tally of all of them. So when we do plan updates like this, we can kind of look at it as a whole. So I just want to touch base on complete streets, because that is one of the other legislations that we need to implement. Local policies is required by AB 1358. And my definition for complete streets is complete streets are safe, comfortable, and convenient travel for everyone regardless of age or ability, motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transportation riders, and are designed to be environmentally sustainable with an emphasis on connectivity. A little bit of a mouthful, but that's our goal and what we want to do and interpret complete streets. So what does it mean exactly, complete streets? Well, it requires us to evaluate the transportation from various perspectives, and we want to make sure everything's accessible and multimodal. So one thing I do want to touch on, though, I mean, there's a few caveats that come with complete streets. It's not this panacea to transportation issues. There isn't a specific design, a prescription, or a formula. The idea for complete streets is you're evaluating all those modes, can't speak, it's getting late, and making sure it's accessible to everybody. And because of that, you're looking at each project uniquely and what it means in that particular community context. So that road and that purpose in this neighborhood, as opposed to just in general, a collector street, a residential street. We're looking at very specifically. So it does not mean that every street is going to have sidewalks and bike lanes and transit routes. it means we're going to look at everything and put in what's appropriate for that area. And it's not a mandate for immediate retrofits. So we are going to do projects as they roll out as the low-hanging fruit, things that we see that we can easily implement as we improve roads or as new roads come in. We're going to look at implementing the theory of complete streets for everything. And on to the last portion for me, evaluating the public concerns and issues. So as we've been trying to emphasize throughout the presentations, we want your input. What are the perceived issues that you see throughout town? Where are those issues? What are the needs that you see transportation-wise, whatever mode it may be, that is needed? And where are they? And what desired outcome, what would you like to see? What would be your solution to some of these issues or needs? We're looking at different criteria as well. Speeding issues, where? Congestion areas, where are you seeing them? When are you seeing them? If there's inadequate access to different points of the community, let us know, and specifically where, so we can help identify and look at those as we move forward with the study. So with that, I'm going to take a brief break and a Q&A. And if there's any comments, if you don't have questions, you just have comments too, please email us or raise your hand. We'll put it in the chat, and we'll get everything documented and recorded.
So realizing it's 8 o'clock here, we are happy to take any questions or comments, but if you have to go, understand. So if you need to email planning@cityofbuellton.com or type your comments into the chat, we'll get them there too. So I see Len has raised his hand. I'm gonna try to unmute him. Oh, I think he is already unmuted.
Unmuted, you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So a comment and a question. My comment is that as Rose noted, the city is bisected by 101 and by 246. So we really have 4 quadrants. I do think that it would be important to think about circulation, not just in terms of how traffic moves, but how people move, how residents move from one quadrant to another, how they currently move and how we might move in the future when there's a new bowling alley and things like that. Mm-hmm. And my question then is there any new data that the city can bring to the table regarding destinations? How many people actually go to Industrial Way as a destination, for example, versus Avenue of Flags, or how many go to Riverview Park, wherever? I'm just wondering if there's any new data that could be factored into this plan revision update.
Well, we're trying to gather the data for the traffic counts that we've been trying to record. We don't have ones recently we're hoping to get, but there have been a few counts from a few projects that we've noted, and we're trying to use that to help review as well. So we are evaluating that. And duly noted on the quadrants, definitely moving from point A to point B in different sections of the city is an important role. And
by different modes, not just by...
Correct, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other participants that have questions, you can raise your hand. I'm not seeing any.
Let's see, Marcelo would like to speak.
Let me go and unmute him.
I think, Marcelo, you may need to, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, as far as the traffic plan is for the existing traffic, are all our intersections or major intersections being monitored, like 246 and Avenue of the Flags?
What do you mean by monitored?
Are there cameras up there looking at us as we drive through there?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when we do counts, we have to go through and do the tape in the road where they manually count movement passing through, but we don't have that feature.
We do have cameras up there though, right?
There was a period that the chamber installed, it wasn't a camera, it's more like a motion sensor type device at a few different locations to help accumulate traffic input, getting the traffic counts and so on, but they're not cameras. They're more sensing the size.
Yeah, a lot of cities and whatnot are constantly monitoring the traffic and people driving in and out. Thank you.
Okay, so if we can move on to the next section, we're trying to get everybody out of here by 8 o'clock, so we're be going over just a little bit. I will keep this section brief and then just do a really quick wrap up. One of the other items that we need to address during the update of the land use and circulation element is to incorporate recent state legislation requirements for addressing social equity. And the Senate bill that was recently passed emphasized the role of social equity, environmental justice, and urban planning. And environmental justice, it in essence means the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of our local laws, regulations, and policies. So it's basically an all-encompassing, an equitable community. And also, if we could go to the next slide, please. Social equity and environmental justice. It also addresses potential inequities among the city's population with regards to the social and economic burdens that may be disproportionately felt by certain populations more than others. So this notion of disadvantaged communities are examined as part of the social equity review. And a disadvantaged community are areas that are most affected by economic, health, and environmental burdens. And in determining whether a community has a disadvantaged community, there are certain criteria that are looked at, and Buellton doesn't really have any identified disadvantaged communities that meet the criteria that is being used, but nonetheless, the good planning practices and the laws encourage communities such as ours to take a look at what we can do better to address perhaps small pockets of inequities in the community, or environmental factors that may need to be addressed. And some of these environmental factors are, and social factors, air quality, educational attainment, housing burden, linguistic isolation, health problems, poverty, and water quality. And there's many others, but those are the broad categories that we'll be looking at. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, we currently have no identified disadvantaged communities, but we will take a look if there are certain small pockets of communities that need to be identified, and whether there may be potential hazards related to air quality and education, and as I previously mentioned, that we need to minimize across the entire population in order to establish an equitable community. Next slide, please. And these are some of the characteristics that we're going to be monitoring. And again, these this is a new concept that we're being asked to address as part of the general plan update, but certainly not a new concept when it comes to our own personal experiences in the community. And we've just heard some comments from participants in this presentation that our population characteristics, our demographics may be changing, and we may need to be addressing whether our facilities and our services are adequately going to be addressing the needs of, for perhaps the elderly. And so those sort of items are going to be looked at as part of this social equity element in the general plan. Next slide, please. So if you believe that environmental justice or social equity is a potential issue in Buellton, if you could send in some comments to us, just to let us know what of these issues that are listed here you feel currently exist in Buellton that need to be addressed. Perhaps there's other issues that you feel might be appropriate. So please, please provide us your comments either via the chat or if they're lengthier comments, please submit them to the via email to planning@cityofbuellton.com so that we can take a look at those and address them as part of this update. And I will just very briefly ask if anybody has a quick question. We don't have a lot of time because we're already 10 minutes over, but if there are any quick questions that we can at least raise so that we'll know what areas of concern there might be, please do so right now, and we'll try and give you a quick answer. Okay, so I'm not seeing anybody. Okay. Well, with that, again, just please do email us with your areas of concern. Next slide, please. So I intended to go over this a little bit more in depth here, but I wanted to just provide some examples of the types of preliminary issues and recommendations that we are looking at. I mean, these may change throughout the process, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through all of these. This presentation is going to be posted on our planning department website. So I would encourage you to come back and take a look at these preliminary issues. As I mentioned, we're going to be working with these and further developing these. So this was a list that we took a look at just to see, some of the issues preliminarily on land use. Claire, if you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, there was another one on circulation there too. Okay, so there's another list of issues, and I think most of these have already been covered in the presentation, so there's nothing new in here, but we will be looking at developing these further in the process. So, okay, now we can go to the wrap-up slide. All righty. So anyway, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for participating in this workshop tonight. This is a new experience for us, and we were really excited about being able to put together a virtual workshop, and I'm hoping that this provided some meaningful information for you, and we certainly appreciate the input that we have gotten so far, and looking forward to getting more input from the community on this. So just as a brief recap of the process, we're going to take all of the findings that we've been collecting through the reports and the data that we've been collecting, taking a look at the existing conditions. Just went into pretty much detail on the existing conditions of the roadway network and what we're looking at in terms of potential vision and areas that need to be addressed. We're going to take a look at the feedback that we're getting from the community. We're going to compile all of the issues, your needs, your desired outcomes, kind of plug those into a set of updated goals, policies, and programs for both the land use and circulation elements. And those in turn will be incorporated into draft and final plans. You will have further opportunities to participate and provide us with your comments, both at public hearings and workshops throughout the process. So each year, we will make these reports available to you and have more sessions like this as we go along. And the final slide, we really would like you to stay connected. To mention, we have the website, well, it's the planning department's website on the city's webpage. Has a section for the general plan update. Hopefully within the next few months we'll be able to create this into a standalone website, but for right now we're on the planning department page. Please submit comments anytime you think of them. Shoot us comments. We will have surveys that will be available. We've sent out a survey already asking for your input, and we're going to continue to send out surveys. So please watch for notices. We do post them on Facebook. We send them out in the buzz. We will be posting them on the city's website too, in terms of when our next workshop will be, and surveys that we'd like you to take a moment to reply to throughout the process. So I would like to wrap it up at this point. We're a little bit past 8 o'clock, not too bad, and I think we've covered an incredible amount of information and had some really meaningful discussions this evening. And I thank everybody for participating. And I think my last slide is probably just a thank you slide. Yep. All right, so I think with that, we will close this workshop.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.